Adele did all these vocals, sat on a sofa behind me, recording this on a laptop.
There's a fire starting in my heart, reaching a fever pitch and it's bringing me out the dark. Finally, I can see you crystal clear. Go ahead and sell me out and I'll lay your ship bare. See, I'll leave with every piece of you. Don't underestimate the things that I will do.
Hello, it's me again. Welcome to Church Studios. I'm going to be breaking down the composition and production of a track called Rolling the Deep today. We wrote the track about 6 years ago now. It happened quite spontaneously. It was based on an idea of a riff that Adele had had for some time, I think. She came to the studio and we tried a few other things and none of which worked. And it sounded a bit like this.
There's a fire starting in my heart, reaching a fever pitch and it's bringing me out the dark. Finally,
I think many of you will know this part because this is actually this first take was actually a performance that went down onto the first verse of the song. But the idea she had was originally this vocal melody was all essentially one sort of continuous riff, repeated riff that she had. So obviously this is the point at which the pre-chorus would come in. So she's, you can hear she's continuing. And I heard this idea and I thought it was amazing. Picked up an acoustic guitar and quickly worked out some chords that would sit underneath it. And so in the time it takes you to hear this whole piece of vocal, I'd probably come up with the chord sequence that would sit underneath it and the chorus chords, which are fairly simple in their kind of execution. But we obviously realised quite quickly we needed to write a pre-chorus and a decent chorus. When we actually came to record it, she sang us this initial vocal idea, which was one long mantra essentially. You know, we split it up and put a pre-chorus in. So obviously I was sitting on an acoustic guitar trying to work these parts out. In terms of actually recording these elements, it was probably, she sang the basic guide vocal to a tambourine and a piano just doing a low C chord, just so she had something to key to. I put the acoustic guitar stuff down afterwards. We worked out what the pre-chorus chords were, and I already had the chorus chords because I'd worked them out while she was singing the initial vocal. So we were able to put those down, and then we sat down and structured. We worked out. She was obviously working on a vocal melody in parts, and I suggested that the first line of the chorus should go up to a high C, and she didn't think she could get there, but I with a bit of encouragement, she did it very easily. And we put the basic ideas down. I think she was still refining the lyrics, and while she was doing that, I added a piano. And then we discussed the drum parts. Put down the kick drum so I had something to play to, and then I played another kit over the top without the kick drum, so that it was I could sort of concentrate on my hands rather than my feet. And after that, we put some claps on, and then the stomps, tambourine, I think. So I mean, really, there's only kind of minimal components, but it definitely feels like it's we're covering every base. She definitely talked about the idea about making a very real and earthy record. She was talking about like Wanda Jackson and a little bit about Janis Joplin, and it felt like to essentially base the song on these really simple organic components. You know, it would reference all these things in the right way. So yeah, that was part of the intention. I mean, she sang this riff, and in my head, I heard it. I thought, I heard it as a Johnny Cash, White Stripes, some records I love, like Dr. John's Gree or Tom Waits records, and I heard the potential for it to kind of reference some of these things. So I quickly put together these guitar chords, which I managed to put down. I mean, all these things happen pretty fast. So I think the interesting thing here, I sort of didn't really realise I did at the time, was I was changing some of the chords off the beat. make it sound kind of interesting. We sat down and actually worked, obviously worked out a change, which sorry about the ropey acoustic guitar playing. I'm not a very strong musician. And you hear a bit of classic songwriting technique. Goes to the seventh there, just before the chorus. We just sort of discussed a bit about the rhythm track, which there were a couple of different ideas of ways which we could go with it. One of which was to do almost like a sort of skiffle, sort of bap rhythm over the top of it. And she said no, it just needs to be a sort of fall to the floor thing. And I thought, well, actually, it could almost be a bit like Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. So literally, I jumped on the drum kit and I stuck down a just literally very simple. I mean, actually, I think I've used 2 mics and chucked it down, and you can see there's no fades on the front of it or anything. One kick drum looped out for the course of the song. She decided, just because it's going to be much easier just to put the rest of the kit down on top of it, and it not, my drumming's terrible. So I actually put down a live kit part on top of that without the kick drum on it. So I'll just skip it through. So we used the kit sound was a D27 over the top of the drums as an overhead. Cheap U47 copy that was hanging in the room. I gaffer taped this hanging from the ceiling, about 10 feet away, and I think a 4-on-4 on the kick, which is obviously I wasn't using a kick track here, and a Rode Classic 2 on the snare drum, which was you can hear it's pretty raw sound, and Adele thought we needed a bit more oomph on the low end, so we added an 808 just to sort of just to give us what we were looking for. So you can hear the basic kit sound there. Actually, none of these parts made the final version, but I think it's interesting to show how close the demo is to the recording, and also show how the process was, how we built up the song. So one thing that did make it to the final version was my ropey bass playing. So still not satisfied with the kind of power of the rhythm. Adele suggested there's a wooden step in my studio which had cables running underneath it, just underneath the entrance, and we thought, well, why don't we do some stomps on it? So obviously we come back to so we actually did almost go back to the skiffle beat. We're doubling the claps up at the end. So. They were laughing. So the kind of I don't know how much to go into the kind of the compositional side of things. We really felt like this was quite a good demo. It was never intended to be a production. It was supposed to be a songwriting demo. And then I think everybody lived with it so long, and her vocal performance was so good. We ended up having to come back and sort of reproduce it without really changing too much about what the identity of the song and the sound of it was. And because I mean, there were certain things we did that seemed kind of fairly intuitive at the time, but were possibly harder to recreate later in a way that was as effective. And let's have a look at what we actually used on the. I think the only vocal reverb was a UAD Space Echo, and maybe there might be a little bit of EMT plate on it. Let me have a look. tiny bit of tape delay. So you can see it's fairly simple in its essence. I think the whole thing took about 5 hours to put together. When she actually decided she wanted to come back and produce it properly, we decided we were going to take these parts out of Logic and put them into Pro Tools so we could go into a tracking session in a proper studio rather than what looked like a garden shed. We were looking at sort of backing vocal ideas, some of which made the final version.
You're gonna wish you never had
So there's the low
me.
ones.
Tears are gonna fall, rolling in the deep. You're gonna wish you never had met me. Tears are gonna fall, rolling in the deep.
Adele did all these vocals, sat on a sofa behind me, recording this on a laptop to an Apogee ensemble through a Universal Audio 6176 on a Rode Classic 2 mic. And I think that we always imagined these would just be demo vocals. She's really feeling it.
We could have had it all, rolling in the deep. You had my heart inside of your hand, and you played it to the beat.
You can see we hardly did anything to the vocals really, which were kind of, I think also shows what an amazing singer she is. There's a really incredibly ropey MIDI piano. So obviously the low notes which just anchor the chorus. So obviously the stomps, claps, here we go. Acoustic guitar's not even in tune. So I think that's really all there is to it. I mean, a couple of overdub crash cymbals. Not really much more. It was always intended to be a songwriting demo, and she wanted to record the final version as a live performance. One of the problems, I think it's something I encounter time and time again in production, is the demo vocal has such a spontaneity and an amazing sense of feeling to it. It's very, very hard to recreate. And I think that was something that was posed a great problem for her to try and recreate this performance. In the end, I think she chose to come back and try and. She actually asked if she could put the demo out. I said, "Well, let's go into the studio and finish it properly." So actually, he was next door. Went into Eastcote Studios and this beautiful old MCI board that was in Island Records back in the '70s, and some lovely old Valve mics. And we exported all this stuff into Pro Tools. Some of the acoustic guitar stayed, the bass stayed, all the vocals stayed. She might have patched a couple of lines in. The stomp stayed. I think we went and retracked the drums and had a proper piano player come in and play. Here's the Pro Tools session of the final recording of Rolling the Deep. I think after having done the demo, we decided to take it to Eastcote Studios. I was absolutely definite we needed to re-record the drums, the piano, and probably get a better recording, an in-tune recording of the acoustic guitar, and maybe add some electric to it. So obviously we started out with the drums. So Leo Taylor, who's a good friend of mine, who's an amazing drummer, came in and we set up a Ludwig Super Classic, which is the same kit as we used for the demo. But this time we set it up, and I've got this marching band kick drum, which is about 28 inches, and we set that up in front of the Ludwig kick drum, and put some blankets over the top. It definitely adds something to the vibe of the track. but the drums were never quantized. It was it was a completely live performance with timing variation, and I think that was something we really felt like it was important to try and get the best performance we could without having to get into editing. So it really did feel like it had a rawness and authenticity to it. The one thing we did do was we subtly added an app. We use App Trigger a lot, which I think is an amazing plugin to be able to do drum replacement within Logic. But back sort of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it really helped me to move my sort of production ideas forward very quickly. Sort of drag and drop samples in and just be able to drop that on a live kit pass where the recording wasn't very good, and essentially sort of sound replace the drums, or be able to get interesting grooves with drum machine sounds. So here we've added a nice tight kick to it, because obviously the kick drum itself is quite, I mean that's a sort of quite subby. It's an NS10 driver on the front of the kick, a D12, but you can hear there's a kind of quite bright, there's a sort of loose slappiness to it. And I think a lot of the rest of the kit sound, we used actually a sort of binaural head to try and get the overall sound of the like the sort of stereo image of the kit. So if you listen to the kit sound as a whole, and you can see the actual drum part it's a very slightly developed version of the demo I put down, because again we were trying to stay as close to the demo as we could. We've still got the stomps from the demo, which obviously you can see when you add those in. And stomps and clap. And we actually did some more claps as well in Eastcote. I think I redid the tambourine in Eastcote as well, so that we actually got a better sound. You can see here, if I open up the clap reverb, you can see how we're using the pre-delay to try and give a little bit of swing and timing to the feel of the rhythm track as well. So let's have a look. So the bass is the demo bass still. You see it's bounced out of Logic. We used the original MIDI piano bass that I'd used from the EXS24 in Logic, just because it felt tighter and it was a bit more consistent than than when we actually tracked the low piano in Eastcote. So what we did add was this piano part, which I think the performance is really, really good. And you can see how he's put the counter he's playing with the left hand helps to make the track. To me, it helps to make the track feel a bit faster than it is. So you add those little discrete rhythms, which I think really help the groove. We've been recording pianos with a couple of KM86s strapped to the soundboard of the piano, which is something that we discovered that Abbey Road liked to do, and it sounded great, and it seems to be quite a flexible way of how, you know, we leave the KM86s there all the time pretty much, but it seems to be quite a flexible way to actually, you know, you can open up the piano and work with it. You can close the piano off if you want to record other instruments while you're tracking piano. You can actually hear how much control room spills on the piano here. to record the piano, I think we'd have definitely gone through, you know, probably the best stereo compressor that was available in the studio at the time. It may well have been 1178 or something. So let's go back and have a look at the acoustic guitar, which is obviously such a sort of key component of this track. So you can see we've actually got the original out of tune acoustic from the Logic demo on the front up to the first pre-chorus, and from then on it switches to a new acoustic performance which we recorded to make it a bit wider. So obviously you get this nice change of width of image, so you can hear the very slightly thinner sound we've got here. And then when it gets to the pre-chorus, you can hear it widens up. What we've got here is essentially we used the binaural head again, so we had a bit of a wider image. So if I mute the close mic, so it scoops a lot of room woolliness out of that. But I think it helps to give the track a bit of width. Difficult part of this to play. I really struggle with playing this acoustic guitar because I'm not a great guitarist. It's so kind of tight, and the kind of rhythm of it has to be so, it felt like it had to be so specific. It took a while to get it. I'm still not convinced there aren't mistakes all the way through this, but I guess part of the charm might be the imperfections. There's an electric guitar that runs underneath a lot of the song. Again, it's a binaural head and a close mic. The electric guitar part was, I felt we needed to be pretty specific if it was going to work and not make the track feel too rock. I guess to me there's quite a nice, there's almost like a quite 80s percussive quality to this. Helps to sort of dilute the retro feeling of the song a bit. There's a specific idea here to try and do an almost sort of Velvet Underground kind of muting with the right hand and the left hand. As you can hear, there's mistakes all over the place, but again, is that part of the charm? I don't know. And you can hear how the way it opens out there, I think it helps to make the fact this chorus is a bit more dynamic than the first one. So I felt like there was a really conscious effort to try and create this really live structure, but there was this, the electric guitar to me creates a lot of restrained power in the track. Begins to really open out here, and it feels like, and the drums sort of, as he opens the drums out, it feels like it sort of it begins to build. And I think the tempo actually, I think it's the drums and the guitar actually start pulling against the click. This is an interesting one because obviously this was a space I wasn't intending to play, but I just, you know, I was just filling a bit of space there, and actually did something that was quite nice. A bit rough around the edges, but it, you know, like if you're obviously hearing the demo without that in, it feels like there's something missing, having heard the original tracks, or having heard the master of the track. But you can hear quite at the end, it with the electric really helps to lift the song. So let's put the bass in underneath that for the. I think you can hear as I'm hitting the electric guitar harder, the tuning's starting to slip a bit. But you know, I guess we wanted it to feel raw. I guess that's part of what gives it the character, I think. So let's have a look at that electric again and just have a look what isolate the. So that's the binaural head, which you can hear really just gives a kind of alive and sort of roomy width to the close mic, and obviously how the acoustic and that fit together quite well. Let's go back and have a look at her vocals, because all these vocals again were bounced out of Logic, and we did and we added these bridge, fill the space here. I think that's both of us together, and even those are a bit definitely not perfect. But let's have a look at a lead. We've hardly treated anything after, you know, from the demo. And obviously this session was sent to Tom Elmhurst, who did a wonderful mix on it that I think changed he developed the track even further, you know, took it to its kind of like ultimate conclusion, and the mix is really amazing. He's a bit of a genius, Tom. Because we had a real space echo available, we decided we were going to print the vocals back through this real space echo for authenticity. Now, I couldn't tell you whether that print made it into the final mix that Tom did, because I think he's got sort of spring reverbs and some, you know, he's got his go-to things. Whatever he did, it sounded like it was true to this effect. We must have been pushed for time because we printed all the vocals through the space echo at the same time. So let's have a little look and see what's going on.
There's a fire starting in my heart. It's bringing me out the dark. Finally, I can see you crystal clear. Go ahead and sell me out and I'll lay your ship bare. See, I'll leave with every piece of you. Don't underestimate the things that I will do. There's a fire starting in my heart, reaching a fever pitch and it's bringing me out the dark. The scars of your love remind you of us. They keep me thinking that we almost had it all. The scars of your love, they leave me breathless. I can't help feeling we could have had it all. Rolling in the deep, rolling in the deep. You had my heart and soul, and I wish you never had met. Tears are gonna fall to the beat, rolling in the deep. Baby, I have no story to be told. But
there's still a glitch on the end of one of those backing vocals that we never cleaned up either. So yeah, I mean, obviously you can hear how that, you know, the character and sort of analogy distortion that the space echo gives the track is really part of what gives its identity. You can see that's pretty much the only vocal reverb we've got going on this session. You know, generally you can see it's quite a simple track in its essence. We felt like it was really important to use the binaural head to give sort of live depth to using minimal parts, to make it almost feel like a band playing in a room. But I think approaching the guitars with that methodology, and then giving the kick drum in this is so heavy and so loud that it feels kind of almost how sort of sensitive the acoustic guitar is. But something about that chemistry obviously worked with the benefit of hindsight. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all it is. Whoa. We had this marching drum sat in front of the Ludwig kick drum and carpets over the top. I remember taking a bit of time to choose which mic to use because you weren't going to get so much presence from the marching drum because there's obviously another two skins in front of the Ludwig. I think we ended up using a D12 unusually for me because I tend to prefer a decent condenser mic on a kick drum and an NS10 driver for the super low. The snare was a KM84, which I do like to use small condensers on the snare and obviously pulling them in and out according to how much low end you want, using a bit of proximity effect. With this track, we felt the snare didn't need to be that heavy because it didn't need to compete with the kick drum. I'm sure we must have had an under snare, but it doesn't look like it here. Yeah, we've got the overheads with the R88 ribbon, stereo ribbon. I think a Bayer 201 as well, over the top. One of the key things we used was a binaural head. It recreates very well the spatial relationship between the human ears and the phase correlation. It's sort of, if you were to stand in front or behind one of these things with the fold back in headphones and put the headphones on, it almost doesn't feel like you put headphones on. You get this amazing sense of space, and it's very useful for when you're in a recording situation that's big enough to sort of place instruments around the room, to be able to actually adjust the position and have a listen on the binaural head, and to be able to get a really clear idea of what the mixed panorama is going to be like if all the musicians are playing together. So sometimes, I sort of learnt a bit about this from working with Phil Brown on a Mark Hollis from Talk Talk solo record, and he was telling me he did something similar with this Mark Hollis record, but using a couple of Neumann M49s. And then they got all the musicians in and set them out around the room, and then worked out what the balance was, and then sent the musicians away and got them back to come in and overdub independently. So you had independent control. So that's something obviously I think, in the back of my mind, it was something I wanted to do here, was to try and, we've set the acoustic guitar up to just to the left of the binaural head and the electric guitar up to the right, so that we could put the binaural head stereo faders up, and we were able to play, the instruments would have their own natural positions. And obviously with the close mics, we could sit those there as well. We obviously sat in the middle of the room, but we sat them further back in the room from where the acoustic and electric were sitting, to try and create this sense of a natural feeling of a kind of stereo positioning. Because we were trying to use the binaural head to place instruments around the room and then have control over them later, we obviously couldn't track everything together. We obviously had to try and make it feel like it was a live recording without some of the problems of spill between the instrumentation. So we obviously would have tracked the drums first to the demo parts that existed from the Logic session, and then the piano went down next. The bass obviously was from the Logic session, and then I think once both Leo and Neil, the piano player, had left, it gave me a bit of time to kind of sit and try and sit my acoustic guitar part into what they put down, because obviously we were aware there might be timing fluctuations with the drums if we weren't going to edit it, and we wanted to make sure that we had time to get my guitar parts right, because I'm not a great guitarist by any means. So that was how we put it all together. One of the main things was when miking the drum, obviously the kick drum is such a deep sound that that's the NS10 driver, but even you can hear we've got enough slap and attack on it, but you don't really get a sense of the sort of size of it. We needed to add a bit of extra punch, so we used app trigger with a kick sample, just to fill in the space between the high and the sort of super low. But you get a much better idea of what the kick drum's doing when you listen with the binaural, so you can actually really hear the sort of size of the room there. And obviously how loose the marching drum was. We had to sort of tape, worked out how much tape to put on it just to try and reduce the decay. And obviously the track wouldn't be what it is without these stomps, which were from the original demo. So you can hear this, flamming a bit with the kick drum. It's not perfect, but it's partly why it sounds so good. I came from a very purist background, so I've always been very keen not to do too much to stuff as you record it. I mean, if there's obvious, and I'd much rather change the mic placement or change the mic than to try and start treating things with EQs or compression or even putting too many things in the signal path. But there's a balance to be had, and I think once you get the best sound you can with the equipment that's available, I think we may have a tiny bit of limiting on the kick mic or maybe the snare mic. Apart from that, I'm sure probably nothing very much. I'm sure we did this to tape. And for any reason why we wouldn't have done it to tape, because they've got a great tape machine at Eastcote. It's definitely got to sound like it went to tape anyway. I mean, I think most of the mic amps were the mic amps from the MCI board. It's an amazing old desk that was in Island Records in the 70s, and I think all the Marley records were done on it. And it's definitely got a superb character. You know, everything translates beautifully through it. We probably did 4 takes, dumped them all into the computer, tried to work out what we had, and then I clearly remember us having this in 3 or 4 takes. I think we're so familiar with the sound of drums and guitars that have been recorded to tape because it's the sort of heritage of those instruments. If there's a tape machine available to do it, or you can use tape recreation plugins. I use them wherever I can, basically, to try and give it a richness and organic quality. But it doesn't have to necessarily have hiss to impress me, you know. We would have synced the tape machine and the computer. It's like you let the computer slave to the tape machine and track like that, and then bounce all the takes back in. I feel like it's much easier to do vocals to straight to digital to keep the clarity and you know and sort of, you know, you're not an increase of noise. It's much easier for editing. I think we had 4 or 5 days to re-record all these parts and another track called Waiting. You know, so we had brass. We were going to put brass on that. My hunch is we probably had Leo in on day 1. We probably had Neil in on day 2, and we probably had the brass in on day 4 and day 3 for guitars and day 5 for vocals, I guess. So it wasn't a quick process by any means, but we were definitely trying to get it done as fast as we could. We left the binaural head stationed in the right by the door, the control room doors, in the middle of the room, because it's kind of the room's kind of an L shape with the control room taking up one corner of what would be the L to make the square. So we positioned the binaural head in the middle, and we sort of placed everything round the outside. So from the acoustic guitar would have been here, the electric amps were over here, drum kit would have sat around here, and we'd obviously move things backwards and forwards to try and get the sort of necessary depth. I mean, I think the guitar amps were much further back than the acoustic, obviously, because it would have been to try and create the sort of separation between the two. In terms of guitar recording, I think it looks like here we used a Bayer 201 on the guitar. It's something that I know Mark Rankin, who recorded Rolling in the Deep, he was very keen on using at the time. He's quite into using ribbons on guitars. I've always been quite into Royers or 87s or a combination of both, depending on what the sound is you're looking for. And sometimes I use a 57, but I tend to like the sort of slightly more high fidelity of condensers or ribbon mics, and sometimes combining the both I find is often the best bet, because the two can blend together and you end up with a slightly sort of more complete sound. I think in terms of amps, I think it was an old 50s Les Paul through a Mesa Boogie, fairly standard guitar stuff. Probably no plug, no pedals. I don't think, as far as I can remember, it was just straight into the amp. It was always going to be a challenge to beat the guide vocals. So I think we were always very sure that we didn't need to go back and record anything again. The one thing, you know, obviously you can see we added the backing vocals in the bridge, because we knew that was an idea we developed a bit later on. And she had this idea for this outro vocal, which is a counter melody over the end chorus. When you capture a performance like that, and it has this rawness and feeling, and then you've tried to beat it, and I've no idea how many takes she did when she came to track it, but I just sometimes think that, you know, that if you're in that moment and the feeling's really real, it becomes impossible to beat. And I think these days where a demo would mean a relatively decent condenser mic into an above average, you know, microphone amplifier, into a decent hard disk recording system, the difference between a demo and a finished record is very, very slim. If you're looking at it, all comes down to performance, and if the performance of the demo is really, it has just got this magic to it, you can't beat it, I don't think. It's a challenge for a modern producer, I think, is that how do you then take these things that have been recorded in those situations, and you have to make the best of what you've got. And I think you do have to be respectful to the demo, or it's not even a demo really. It's like you have to be respectful to the first draft and try and finish it off. You don't want to change too much without good reason. I think the production of this track always felt like I knew what it had to be, because the demo had almost suggested what it should be, and we weren't going to try and move away from it too much. So yeah, I think that's how it all worked out.